Welcome to the Military Minute Podcast. I'm Mike Jennings. Thanks for joining us today. Today we're continuing on in what we refer to as our Foundation series. And our Foundation series is focused on helping you to understand all of the key elements in the interview process so that you can execute them successfully. So today, we're going to talk about situational interview questions. We're going to talk about what they are. We'll talk about why they're asked, what it is that the employer is looking for when they ask those, and then how to handle that. So this is going to actually be a part of a three-part mini-series here, so let's jump right in and get started. So what is a situational interview question? Situational interview questions usually start with something that sounds like this. It usually actually isn't a question. It usually starts as a statement. And the statement sounds like this. Tell me about a time when you had to handle an underperforming employee. Or tell me about a time when you had to troubleshoot a piece of equipment that you've never seen before. Or that you had to do something that you've never done in the past. These are situational questions. And so the idea behind this question and what they are is that they want you to go back in time to something that actually happened to you that addresses this particular situation. And the reason for this is that they want to know that you have had similar experiences to what you're going to encounter whenever you start your job. That's why it's important that these are actually answers that come from your history. So this question has some really good opportunity associated with it. And the reason why this kind of question has so much opportunity is because what they're asking you to do is to tell a story. So we can't really address this properly until you fully understand what the power of story really is. And I will tell you a short story here about a book that I had read that really brought this to light. And it was a sales book. And the reason why this is significant is not that just because it was a sales book and it was written by some authors that I know and I respect. No, what was important about this particular sales book is that it was written by a couple of people who were involved with another organization who wrote another sales book that was written 3 years prior to that they had been working as consultants inside of companies to teach them this technique. And the core element of this in their teaching for sales was, we're going to try to help get over the 80-20 rule, or the Pareto principle, if you want to understand the technical term. And the idea behind this is that 20% of the salespeople were producing 80% of the results. And they wanted to basically help the other 80% of the salespeople produce more to the company so the top 20% wouldn't be so impactful. So after 30 years of implementing this, when they went back, they found out they had made the situation worse, not better. The top 20% were now producing 87% of all sales, and the other 80% only 13% of the sales. So this caused them, quite remarkably, to go back and have to get honest with themselves that they were all wrong. I mean, what it is that they do worked, but it only made the really good people better. It didn't help for everybody. So that caused them to study ultimately what caused people to make decisions. Instead of analyzing this from the point of view of just how to go through a sales process, they analyzed this from the point of view of what causes people to be influenced to make a decision. And I'll save you the details of all of this, but in the end, ultimately what they realized was the very best salespeople that separated them from everybody else was that they actually used stories as part of the process, an appropriate story for the situation that was in front of them. So when we look at this in the interview process and we bring this full circle back to you, is you're now being asked to tell a story for a particular situation and to make it appropriate. So when you put your story together, you now have the ability to influence the person who is interviewing you to like you better and to follow along ultimately with the goal that you're trying to sell them on, which is making you an offer at the highest level. So how do we respond when somebody asks us to tell a story? Okay. These are stories now that just aren't any kind of story. These are stories with a point. As I highlighted in my example, these stories are asking you to address a very specific question, a very specific situation. So when it comes to answering these kinds of questions, the first thing that you need to remember is that you're going to be talking for 2 to 3 minutes based upon how complex that your story is. And where this is important to remember is that it's very easy to get yourself off track in 2 to 3 minutes of storytelling. So the first thing that you can do, and the one thing that we're going to cover here today for this is that when you're asked to do a situational answer or an answer to a situational question, the first thing that you're going to do is rephrase the question back to the interviewer. And then you're going to extend that to where it is that you believe that the story should land. That's important. When you say that out loud and you say the question back to the interviewer, you're showing them that you understand what they've asked you to do. And then when you tell them where this story should land in the end, you're telling them that you understand the outcome that they're looking for. But more importantly, you're telling yourself where this story has to land. You, by speaking it out loud and hearing it with your own ears, will ultimately help you to stay focused to get to where you need. So if we use this example that I said first about the underperforming subordinate, in this question, say, okay, so you'd like me to tell you about a time when I had someone who worked for me who was not living up to the standards. And what you'd like to hear is how I was able to address that issue with the person and get them back to being a good performing employee again. Is that right? And they're going to say, yes, tell me that. And then you're going to start into your story. So that's all we have time for today. Think about that until next time when we talk about the specifics of how to structure this. Thanks for joining us here on the Military Minute podcast. Be sure to check us out online at absolutelyamerican.com and corporategray.com. And for more details on this, check out my new book, On Target and On Time, Precision Guidance for the Military to Civilian Transition. We'll see you soon. Thanks.
Thanks for joining the Military Minute. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts so you're notified when a new episode is released. Is there a topic or conversation you want discussed here on the show? Send it to me at scott.cunningham@militaryminute.us.